I've repositioned my goal since the last video, just to make it easier for testing, so if I happen to completely miss the ball, it's still eventually going to roll its way into the goal. And the reason I've done this is because we're going to animate some explosions, kind of like you have in Rocket League when you get a goal. I'm going to want to create heaps of these explosions, so I'm going to create a new scene so that I can instantiate it from other scripts. It's going to start with just a node that I call explosion, and I'm going to save this scene as explosion.tscene. The first thing we'll want is a mesh instance, and it's going to be our ball. I don't need collision shapes or anything else for this one because it's just going to be a visual graphic. Doesn't sort of need to collide with anything else. We are going to make this ball look very explodey. Now we're going to come down to its material, and this material is going to look really similar to the one we did for lava. I'm going to have an orangey kind of a colour, maybe a bit yellower for the explosion. And I'm going to add an emission to make it really glow. That's my emission colour. I'll really drag up the energy on my glowing explosion. This is looking exciting already. Now we get to the bit where we animate this explosion. I'm going to add an AnimationPlayer. AnimationPlayer. So we have seen animation players before, but it's only been on GLB assets that we've imported. We've never had to make our own animation. Now I am going to make my own animation, and if I'm clicked on the animation player, you'll see that there's an animation section down the bottom that lets us control some animations. And the first thing we want to do is add a new animation. That's what this button does. It's not very obvious that it's a button, but if you click that, you can add a new animation, and we're going to call this one Explode. Click OK, and we can start adding things to this timeline in the animation. So nothing happens yet, but you can see my timeline plays for 1 second. I'll go back to the start, and I can anything that I want to happen at the start of my animation, I can lock in place by hitting one of these keys that's popped up. And anything I want to happen at the end of my animation, I have to play to the end, make sure my timeline is at the end of the animation, and then again I can hit one of these keys to lock that in place as being part of the end of my animation. So, making sure that I've clicked on the animation player to get all the little keys, going to go back to my mesh. I'm going to scale it and transform all the way down to 0, so that at the start of my animation I've got such a small ball that you can't see it at all, and I'm going to hit this key. Here's my scale key, there we go. I get this pop-up saying, because it's the first time I've animated scale, it's going to use this value as the one that it stores if you're not playing any animations. That's what it means by the reset track. That's what gets played when there's no animation happening. I'm fine with that. Then I'm going to play for 1 second, so I get to the end of my animation. And I'm going to change the scale at the end to 10. Massive explosion. 10, 10, 10. I've got a big ball there. It's exploded out to size 10. It'd be a radius of 5. And I'm going to hit the key again to lock that in for the end of my animation. So if I go back to the start of the animation, I've got a ball of size 0, and as I play through to the end of the animation, it expands out to a size of 1. Now that was really slow for an explosion, so instead of making this take a whole second, I might just make it take half a second. I can drag the scale that I had, scale of 10, to halfway. Oh, and if I hold down Control and then scroll in, I can expand my timeline so I can see exactly where halfway actually is. 0.5. And that's going to make it explode faster. But our animation is still lasting for 1 second. So I'm also going to change the time of my animation from 1 second to 0.5 seconds. Now I've got a nicely animating ball. When I actually make this explode, I'm only going to want to play it once. But sometimes when you're testing an animation, it's nice to just turn on loop. So this button here cycles between looping. I'll play that now. Got a nice looping animation. If I click it again, I get ping-ponging. It goes forwards and then backwards. And then a third time to turn it off. So we will want to turn this off when we actually play our explosion. But it's just a nice thing to have while we're testing it out. We can watch the animation looping. This is looking pretty good already. But what's going to happen if I'm not looping is after our explosion is finished, we're going to have this massive glowing ball on in our game. And we don't really want that. So I'm going to turn this mesh transparent once the animation is finished. So go to the start of the animation, click on my mesh, and transparency is in a bit of an odd place. It's inside geometry, and here I've got a transparency option. So at the start of my animation I don't need any transparency, so transparency of 0 is perfect. I'm going to click the key, create a reset track for transparency. Now I'm going to play to the end of my animation, and this is where I want the glowing ball to have completely disappeared. So I'm going to drag the transparency slider all the way up, and I've got a completely transparent ball. And I'm going to click the key again. So I've finished with my animation and the ball's completely transparent. Let's loop this animation and see what it looks like when it plays. Yeah, that's looking like a pretty nice explosion already. It starts visible and it goes more and more transparent as it gets really big. I think this is ready to add into our game. The final thing that I want to do with this is make sure that it auto plays at the start. Like every time I create a new explosion, I want this to be the animation that starts playing immediately. So I don't need to turn on loop, but I do want to turn on this button. We've seen it before in the Mixamo video. This will auto play my explosion animation when I start the game. Now I'm going to make sure I've saved my explosion scene. I'm going to go to main, and just for the sake of testing, we're not going to do all the instantiating stuff yet. I'm just going to drag an explosion into my level, somewhere where I can see it. You can't see much at the moment because when my explosion starts it's completely invisible. Well, rather the ball has a scale of 0, 0, but there should be an explosion appearing there at the start of the game, provided that I've selected autoplay on my animation. I hit play on that one, and I get a nice explosion. You'll see what's happened is it's left a giant shadow, even though it's transparent. We can fix that. That's in the geometry section as well. So I'm going back to my explosion. Just underneath transparency, there's an option to cast shadows, and we want that to be off for our explosion. I'll save that. Yeah, nice looking explosion there.